everybody, it's Mike here from the WeWrench shop, and welcome.
With the pistons and crankshaft removed from the engine block, we can now begin the process of cleaning and inspecting this legendary power plant to see the effects that 260,000 miles had on it. So stay tuned because things are about to get interesting. At this point in time, I wanted to take the main bearings out of the engine block, and to do that I used a small screwdriver and just kind of pried on that little relief that they have on the right side there. Makes it pretty easy, they pop right out. With the main bearings out, I just wanted to give the bearing journal surfaces just a little bit of a wipe with some brake clean and my coffee filters. I'm using coffee filters because they're disposable, they're one-time use, but most importantly they are lint-free, and you want to use a lint-free cloth in sensitive situations like this. So coffee filters are my cloth of choice. Next, it was time to get the dipstick tube out of the engine block. Now, there was a lot of footage that I didn't include in the previous episode. I was heating this thing with a torch. I was trying to use a pipe wrench on it. All I had to really do was just hit it with the air hammer on that little breathing nipple there, and it drove it right out of the engine block. Unfortunately, I destroyed it so badly that I'm not able to reuse it, and that part's a little hard to come by, but I did find one overseas, and it is en route to the shop as we speak. The next step was to drive out the freeze-out plugs on the engine block, and to do that I just used a brass drift to knock them into the block, and then I used a set of pliers just to grab them and pull them out. The purpose of a freeze-out plug is for when it gets cold, if the coolant mixture actually freezes, then it won't crack the block. What it'll do is it'll pop these sort of brass inserts out of there, and the coolant will leak out rather than cause a catastrophic failure. And definitely a good practice, good rule of thumb is that when you are rebuilding an engine, you should definitely not reuse them. You should clean the passages out, and you should replace them with new units. So for this next part, I found a bottle of this Simple Green foaming barbecue cleaner that was just laying around my shop. So I know that oven cleaner does really well on degreasing metal parts. So I just decided to give this a try. I doused the front of the engine block with it, and then I went over it with my drill brush, just to see if I can get some of that grease off of there. I'm very, very adamant about not sending this engine out for any reason. I get a lot of comments on this platform and others about, oh, you need to hot tank the block, you need to boil the block, you got to do this, you got to do that. Well, you don't. If you're comprehensive enough and you just take the time to do the job right and you have some basic understanding of techniques, you can absolutely get this block cleaned. So what you're going to see is just some footage of me cleaning various parts of the block. I took it out to be pressure washed. And the next step will be to prepare it to be inspected and measured. I want to remind everybody that the purpose of this channel is not to show absolute perfection, textbook, by-the-book procedures. This channel and this project is about really being the ultimate do-it-yourselfer and utilizing skills and techniques and ingenuity. And you'd be really, really surprised what you can accomplish just by using persistence and simple things that everybody has laying around. There's a pervasive myth that in order to rebuild an engine properly, you have to send it out and that you have to have all these special tools and equipment. Well, if the engine is damaged and it needs to be bored 30 thousandths over and it needs to be a line board and all that other stuff, yes, you need some equipment. But for the purposes of this, we are using skills, we are using techniques, and we are using ingenuity. And I just want to demonstrate the extent of which you can restore a car at home without needing anything truly exotic.
At this point, we're getting ready to start taking measurements, and I'm going to start with the cylinder bores first. because this is the real point of contention. If these bores are worn, that's how I'm going to know that the engine is going to have to go to the machine shop. With the engine block cleaned and degreased, now is the time where we're going to start measuring it. What I want to do is I want to start with the cylinder bores. That's the real point of contention, to see what kind of wear this engine actually endured over 260,000 miles. And after the degreasing, you could see that the walls have some rust on it. The first step is to make sure that these walls are completely clean so we can get an accurate measurement. It's more like surface dirt. You know, when you think of rust, you think like that crusty, heavy rust, you know. This is more just like dirt. And then we want to go in with the coffee filter. So give this a little saturation, and then you wipe. Now the whole thing is that, you know, you don't want to go too heavy. If you put too much oil in here, if you put too much of anything in here, it can affect the reading. Now we're talking about taking readings in a resolution of 10,000ths of an inch. So you really have to be thorough with how we do this. You can see that there's still rust coming out of there. So you just want to rinse and repeat pretty much. With the cylinders cleaned and prepped, it's time to start taking measurements. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my dial bore gauge to get a reading of the inner diameter of the cylinder bore. On a worn engine, interesting things start to happen in there. What happens is the cylinder bores do not wear perfectly round. They actually start becoming oval shaped. And not only do they become oval shaped, they become cone shaped. So what happens is it develops a taper along the bottom of the bore, and throughout the bore it develops a condition called out of round. So when we take our bore measurements, we're going to be taking a total of 6. We're going to do 2 measurements along the top, 90 degrees from each other, a horizontal and a vertical. Same thing halfway down the bore, and the same thing all the way at the bottom of the bore. Now before we do that, what we have to do is we have to calibrate our dial bore gauge. And we're going to do this with this setup that I have over here with the micrometer in a vise. We're going to zero and calibrate the micrometer first, and then we will set the dial bore gauge up to measure this engine.
In the previous shot, I showed the micrometer being clamped in the vise, and in this shot, you could see me setting it up, and I used a couple paint stirrers on each side of the micrometer frame. And you want to do this because if you use just the vise, you can actually distort and destroy the tool. Now in this part, I'm going to show you the actual calibration piece that the micrometer comes with. It's 75 millimeters, and I know it's blurry here, but you can see that there's a temperature and a plus or minus micrometer measurement on there. This piece is so precisely ground that it will fluctuate due to temperature, and it's calibrated to the millionth of a meter. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you're not doing this in a super cold environment. Just any room temperature is fine. You clean off the edges of the micrometer, and then you clean off the edges of the calibration piece. Make sure they're nice and clean, because if there's any dirt on there, it could absolutely affect the calibration. You just put it into the micrometer like so, and you want to make sure that that piece is perfectly straight and lined up with the barrels. And you can see that I'm getting it there to almost within 1/100th of a millimeter. Next thing that we're going to do is get the dial bore gauge set up. Now, this dial bore gauge in particular measures from 2 inches to 6 inches, and it's from Fowler. Very, very nice unit. First thing that you want to do is you want to take the actual dial and you want to put it into the housing, and you want to put it down far enough where the dial goes 1 complete revolution. That's how you know that you're in far enough. The next step is to select one of the measuring barrels. Now these barrels come in a lot of different sizes and resolutions of 0.2 of an inch. And then there are these washers that give you additional spacing. So for this particular application, we are going to choose a measuring barrel of 3.6 inches. And the spacer that we're going to choose is 8/100ths of an inch to give us a total reach of 3.68 inches. The next thing that you want to do is you want to take your calibrated micrometer and set it to the factory bore size. Now in this particular case, the S38B36 bore size is 93.4 millimeters, and you want to lock the micrometer in place. This is going to serve as the 0 point for the dial bore gauge. Now, this next part takes a little practice. You have to take your dial bore gauge and you have to get it in there between barrels of the calibrated micrometer. Now what you're doing is you're setting the 0 point. When you measure the cylinder bores, it's going to give you a reading, a deviation from 0, and that's going to tell you how much wear was in the cylinder. And what you have to do is you have to kind of work it and get that reading to bounce off of 0. And when you find that point, which you could see on that here, you just lock it in place with the little dial. Then you have a dial bore gauge that's ready to go to measure the deviation from the factory bore.
Thank you everybody so much for watching, and thank you for the support. I'm going on 5 months on YouTube right now. It took me 4 months to get my first 1 million views, but in the last 28 days I've gotten 1.3 million views alone, so the channel is definitely growing. Thank you everybody, I could not have done it without you. Also check out the short form content on the channel. There's a ton of YouTube shorts that I've posted. I'm posting 3 a day now, kind of leveling up with that. So if you want to see the project in its various forms in little snippets, some of them are instructional, some of them are funny, definitely check out the short form content on this channel. And also the WeWrench merch line is now live on our website, www.wewrench.com. Free shipping on all items. Starting with this one, the Star Wars theme would have helped if I got out and pushed. I think every automotive enthusiast or do-it-yourselfer can sympathize with this. We have the straight 6 inside with the firing order, mechanically inclined as F. You've seen that shirt before. This one happens to be my favorite from my favorite movie, My Cousin Vinny. Father was a mechanic, his father was a mechanic, my mother's father was a mechanic. And if you've seen the movie, you know the rest. Gambini's Garage. This is an excellent gift. They're all excellent gifts for anybody in your family who's an automotive enthusiast. And once again, www.wewrench.com, free shipping on all items. And once again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.